All right, good morning, everyone. This is fantastic to be able to continue the conversation. Dr. Mary Elizabeth Meyer contextualized the foundation of where our wiki editing is kind of coming from. And I'm kind of jumping into her boat with her, a little bit of her research that she's been doing because we've been working together. And so thinking about the suffrage movement in the United States and its huge historical significance, I wanted to focus my little segment here on African American women's suffrage movement and the representation of women of color within it, or the lack of. So we can hit the next one. Thank you. So this is a screenshot of the wiki page for the African American women's suffrage movement. And in looking at it, one of the first things that I noticed, Mary Elizabeth, is that, first of all, there's no images, or very little, and we're gonna see all the pages, but if you wanted to access it, you could too, so that you could see. So it's lacking in imagery, the visual image culture that Dr. Meyer had referenced earlier being problematic to its absence on Wikipedia, especially as a research site for many people that are accessing these forums. And also, if we quickly run through just that first paragraph and then the origins of the movement, you may notice that there really isn't much information about African American women within those two paragraphs that we're looking at. In fact, I would say that it is more of a Eurocentric white privilege positioning of white women beginning a movement is how it is geared and focused, versus the focus being on African American women during this movement. If we look at the table of contents, it's pretty sparse. It doesn't have a whole lot. And then, so this is the continuation of that wiki page. And you can see how the headings, the movement splits, marginalizing African American women, and the creation of the National Association of Colored Women. All of these, there's a lot of problems or problematic things about the language and the verbiage being used throughout this page that centers this movement around white women, white privileged women, and it is not focusing on the African American women suffrage movement, the people who you'll notice that it's not until the section with the marginalizing that you start to see a couple of names come up. Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells, Mary Church Terrell, that Dr. Meyer focused her edit on. So it's not until the middle towards the end of this page that we even start to see any names associated with the African American women and the suffrage vote. Sorry, I am going between two computers. And then, thank you. So here we have a list of the biographical links, and I'm thinking that because the page does not have any imagery, any visual images, that a lot of these links do on Wiki. So how can this might be a potential source of editing if we can bring in some of those images from these other sources that are already on Wiki, already exist there, and tie them into the African American suffrage movement page so that there is more of those research options there with the images and the text and citations and references. So I'm offering this as one potential place that is fairly easy, I think, that we can collect data from that is already up on Wiki. If we go to the next one. So here I'm pointing out some places that I think are that jumped out at me that for edits that we could tackle today if we wanted to. And so under the creation of the National Association of Colored Women, one of the edits, and I have the links on all of these. I don't know if you're able, I can put them into the chat when I'm done going through my presentation. But basically this first one here is an image of the Rhode Island Women of Color resolution from the US Senate Library, the US Library of Congress. And this link has the documentation, the PDF file with all of the women's signatures. So that's something that could be inserted as a citation in this section, could be an image on the page. It could be further readings or external links connection at the bottom of this page. So that's one potential place. And then the other one, and I did, oh, sorry, thank you. So here in this area, in this last paragraph of this section, this is an ACLU.org article. So Karen, it goes back to what is considered, acceptable on Wiki to include as a citation. But Dr. Sotomayor Brown has done some work with the representation of Black women in history in the United States. And she writes this article about whitewashing movements and racism that I thought could at the very least maybe be included as an external extra link in the reference if we can't put it in here, but that might be a potential place to look at. Next one, please. And then this is another one where Karen, Dr. Kiefer Boyd had mentioned about looping it back in. So how can we have a network and kind of a chain reaction on Wikipedia where the information keeps tying into each other, right? Folding into each other so that we can see this continuum that's ongoing with something with like the African American suffrage movement. And this would be a good example of that. So Ida B. Wells is already on Wiki. There is some information and references about her biography and other things. So bringing in some of that data that already exists online into this section would be another way to cite the work, but also to have these different points of reference ongoing throughout the Wiki and beyond, right, on the internet. Next one, please. Thank you. So here I thought, and this has to do back with my original, one of my main points in starting, is that the language throughout this page is problematic because it is not descriptive, it is not specific, it is very broad strokes that are centered through a Eurocentric, white, privileged, classist viewpoint. And so in this area about the movement splitting, which I have problems with because I don't know, and I'm not an expert in this, but maybe in the language that we're using with, is it a movement that splits or is it a movement that, I don't know, I think thinking about the language and how we're situating this historically is really important. And so the heading section, there's no language for intersectionality, which Dr. Meyer had also referenced in her presentation. So bringing in the existing Wiki connections for intersectionality that also cite Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. And from there, there's also connections with Angela Davis, who is mentioned on this page, but I think would benefit from added references and citations here, would be beneficial to complicate, not maybe complicate isn't the right word, but to situate the complexities of the African American suffrage movement historically. So that's another some potential things that could be done to it. Is that my last one?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So, so I try to be intentional about highlighting some things that I think we could actually do today if we wanted to edit. And most of them are found right through Wikipedia. And I think that this may offer a place that's advantageous because we can bring in some other voices, but we're kind of tying them back in together into this larger conversation of how it's all connected. So, so that's what I was thinking with the African American suffrage movement page. I'd love to know what you all think with this, with what I just shared.
It's fantastic what you shared. And I think we should divide up and actually, try to do this, or, guide us if we each choose something to work on. I would like to make or have a little bit of discussion about that. I think it's the last, is it this page here where the split one? I think it's the last one, the last slide. I'm reading it and trying to, think about what you advise, Leslie, that maybe, is it a movement? Like, is it a split? Is it really important? Is that what's important? And as I look at this racial tensions and so on, but I guess I'd like to have a little discussion there to think about it sounded like you were suggesting maybe the movement splits is too simplistic or something, and that we might think of.
Yeah. And I think Dr. Meyer can probably shed a little bit more light, just because her research on this is a little bit more prolific than mine. But yeah, it just seems like it's very simplistic to just say that the movement split. It makes it sound like all of a sudden there was this group of women, and then all of a sudden, the African American women, for whatever reason, because of race, decided to go off and do their own thing. And my understanding is that, this isn't accurate, right? They've been there, they were there. So it's not like they just showed up and wanted to make their own club or resistance. But Dr. Meyer, maybe you can shed a little bit of light on that. And I don't know, do you even agree with what I'm saying about the movement splits being too simplified?
Yes, I agree that this is too simplified, and it's kind of funny because if we, not funny, but it's interesting that if we think about deep roots of rights, of human rights, if we think about the right to vote as a human right, and human rights in the history of the United States as related to policy and law, then the abolition of slavery is a root of the policy of a human right. And so to say the movement splits, it's like, in my view, abolition of slavery is one of the beginnings of a policy perspective of a right. And so I think, Leslie, your main point about, in this forum, I don't think of, I'm sorry, I should tell you Dr. Sotomayor, and we're just among friends so much. So I would welcome you to just call me by my first name. So anyway, I think that the Eurocentric perspective is a really critical point that you've made. And I think that is really why the movement splits is problematic, is because it's saying it's splitting away from that Eurocentric view.